looking to connect a region of over 600 cultural bridges between our lands.
Hello, I am Crystal Mapa and welcome to ASEAN in Focus. On tonight's headlines. At least 133 people have been killed, including women and children, in an airstrike by the military junta on a village in central Myanmar.
A lot of
U.S. and Philippine troops fire javelin anti-tank missiles at cars standing in as enemy vehicles in the Allies' largest ever war games. Meanwhile, Taiwan stages dramatic civilian disaster preparedness drills involving more than 1,000 volunteers in the wake of China's latest war games. And hazardous pollution levels in northern Thailand have left the historic city of Chiang Mai choking under thick smog, and this had locals worried about the impact on tourism and their health. First, in our news, at least 133 people have been killed, including women and children, in an airstrike by the military junta on a village in central Myanmar, according to the Human Rights Minister of the ousted Shadow National Unity Government, Ang Myo Min. The country has seen widespread violence, with its economy almost paralyzed since the military toppled Aung San Suu Kyi's civilian government in a February 2021 coup. Let's watch this.
that the Myanmar junta continue to violate the five-point consensus. But the key questions that we need to ask now is actually why ASEAN has not been able, to convince the junta, to actually really abide by or follow the five-point consensus. This is the challenge, and especially now when Indonesia is the chair. So I think Indonesia is expecting a lot of, changes, with regard to junta's behavior and juntas. For example, Indonesia should convince other ASEAN member states to really ban Myanmar at all levels to attend every ASEAN meeting, in ASEAN. So basically, Indonesia should also propose the temporary suspension of membership of Myanmar, for example, in order to put pressure, on the junta. If there is nothing changed with regard to the junta's attitudes, because I don't think doing the same things over and over, then hoping a different result, is a good strategy at the moment. So that's why Indonesia, in my view, if we cannot get ASEAN to act together, so I think as a country, as the chair, Indonesia should also explore how that we can actually approach Myanmar issue on our own. So there should be a combination of multilateral approach, which is together with ASEAN, and should be also unilateral policies, which is an Indonesian approach, to this problem. So as Indonesia, I think should really review, the whole approach if there is no progress, by 7th of May when the summit, take place.
The junta confirmed on Wednesday it had launched limited airstrikes after it had received a local tip-off about an event marking the opening of an office for one of the local anti-coup groups. US-based media outlet CNN reported more than 160 fatalities, citing a figure from an exiled former lawmaker. Junta spokesman Zhao Mingtun blamed mines planted by the People's Defense Force coup opponents for some of the deaths. The Saging region, a rebel stronghold near the country's second largest city of Mandalay, has put up some of the fiercest resistance to the military's rule, with intense fighting raging there for months. Rights groups have urged the international community to further restrict Myanmar's access to aviation fuel in the wake of the attack. But this is unlikely because Russia is a firm ally of Myanmar and a large oil exporter. And now a look at the stories that made headlines this week. Today, North Korea, it has successfully tested a solid fuel intercontinental ballistic missile. Media hailed it as a key breakthrough for the country's nuclear counterattack capabilities. South Korea's military said Thursday that the North had likely tested a new type of ballistic missile. The launch briefly triggered an evacuation order in parts of Japan. The officially Korean Central News Agency said a new type of intercontinental ballistic missile, the Hwasong-18, was test-fired as the key means of strategic military force. North Korean leader Kim Jong-un said the new weapon will greatly reorganize their strategic deterrence and reinforce the effectiveness of their nuclear counterattack. The announcement comes a day before North Korea is set to mark one of its most important political anniversaries, the Day of the Sun on April 15. The date commemorates founding leader Kim Il-sung's birth anniversary and has typically been celebrated with significant weapons tests or military parades. Relations between the two Koreas are at one of their lowest points in years, with Pyongyang declaring itself an irreversible nuclear power last year, effectively ending the possibility of denuclearization talks. Also this week, as the U.S. continued to tighten up military ties with the Philippines, the U.S. announced that it's helping the Philippines develop an acquisition plan for a fleet of multi-role fighter aircraft as part of a broader roadmap for the next decade of defense acquisition. Let's watch this.
In the face of coercion and gray zone aggression, Secretary Galvez and I agreed to redouble our efforts to strengthen our combined ability to resist armed attack by modernizing our armed forces. We also discussed near-term plans to complete a security sector assistance roadmap to support the delivery of priority defense platforms over the next 5 to 10 years, including radars, unmanned aerial systems, military transport aircraft, and coastal and air defense systems.
At today's meeting, we redoubled our commitment to modernizing the Philippine-U.S. alliance, recognizing that our partnership will need to play a stronger role in preserving an international law-based international order.
And so the addition of these EDCA sites puts us in a position to be able to not only train together, but also respond to meet the needs of the Philippines in the event of a crisis like a natural disaster. It's essential to our ability to strengthen our combined deterrence posture. I think it's a bit early to try to discuss numbers and specific timing of rotations, but certainly these are things that Secretary Galvez and I will continue to work on going forward.
The basic purposes of these sites would be to address humanitarian disaster-related events, to increase and improve interoperability and training of Filipino and American assets, and also to be in a position to improve interoperability and perhaps respond to other types of security challenges.
What I hear from countries around the world, and what I believe is profoundly in our interest, is for us to manage the relationship with China responsibly. And our goal is peace, security, stability, creating opportunity. It's not to engage in a new Cold War. It's not to contain China. But in doing that, in trying to advance a world that is peaceful, secure, stable, and with more opportunity.
Manila will receive equipment such as radars, military transport aircraft, and drones, as well as coastal and air defense systems as concerns rise over China's growing presence in the region. The two countries also announced they will resume joint freedom of navigation operations sailings in the South China Sea. U.S. and Philippine troops fire Javelin anti-tank missiles at cars standing in as enemy vehicles in the Allies' largest ever war games. The annual Balikatan maneuvers follow a 3-day Chinese military exercise that simulated targeted strikes and a blockade of self-ruled democratic Taiwan, which Beijing considers part of its territory. Let's watch this.
Itself. And what you'll see is to remove the data from the clue.
We are slowly transitioning towards territorial defense. And in order for us to be able to create that credible defense, we have to prepare early. So even if we don't have the modern weapon systems yet in our country, it's important that at least we know how it looks like, we know how it works, and we know how to use them.
Many opportunities with the bond between the United States, funding general between the Army and the U.S. Army.
What we're witnessing here today is really operationalizing everything that our political leaders are talking about, from integrated deterrence to campaigning to building enduring advantage. And this is what that looks like. This is what it looks like when U.S. and Phil military come together, train together, create opportunities together, and at the end of the day really build a partnership and friendship like General Bronner and myself have over the years.
No, the ACOM. Set.
Also this week, China's President Xi Jinping called on the country's armed forces to strengthen military training oriented towards actual combat after Beijing conducted military drills intended to intimidate Taiwan. Xi on Tuesday told the People's Liberation Army Southern Theater Command Navy that the military must resolutely defend China's territorial sovereignty and maritime interests and strive to protect overall peripheral stability. Beijing has also criticized a plan for U.S. forces to use a growing number of bases in the Philippines, including one near Taiwan. The United States and the Philippines are holding their largest ever joint military drills this week, with U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken committing to standing with the Philippines against any intimidation or coercion, including in the South China Sea. She added Tuesday that China must be innovative in its concepts and methods of combat. China and Taiwan split following a civil war in 1949. Beijing views the democratic island as part of its territory and has vowed to take it one day, stepping up its rhetoric and military activity around the island in recent years. Meanwhile, Taiwan stages dramatic civilian disaster preparedness drills involving more than 1,000 volunteers in the wake of China's latest war games. Let's take a look.
我们都知道，现在这个美中的这个关系非常的紧张，那台海的情势也很紧张，所以尤其这几天所发生的一个台海的一个情形，我想大家都了解，全世界都在看，国人也很关心。
发布空袭警报，并决定执行预防性疏散撤离作业。
Screaming citizens reacted to everything from missile strikes to a chemical weapons blast and a deadly metro station attack during disaster preparedness drills in Taiwan on Thursday. More than 1,000 volunteers enacted this alarming range of potential disasters and more in the wake of China's latest war games that ended only 3 days earlier. The pre-planned exercises in Taichung usually focus on disasters. This year, however, war scenarios accounted for the majority of the drills that put a mix of civilians, firefighters, soldiers, and students through their paces. The island's authorities have been readying civilians for an outbreak of conflict, as well as stepping up military spending and training for reservists. Air raid drills were held across Taiwan last year, and a handbook was given to residents to prepare for a Chinese invasion. Thursday's exercise was part of that wider effort after 2 rounds of Chinese war games in the past year and increasingly bellicose threats from the Chinese government under President Xi Jinping. Thursday's drill was the first in a series of 11 that will take place across Taiwan until July. China began their 3 days of military drills around Taiwan in what the People's Liberation Army called a stern warning after Taiwanese President Tsai Ing-wen visited the U.S. and met with House Speaker Kevin McCarthy. The White House had attempted to tamp down the tensions by noting that Tsai's recent predecessors had transited through the U.S. before. But Beijing said this is a serious warning against the collusion and provocation between the Taiwan independent separatist forces and external forces. Let's take a look back.
We are, of course, closely monitoring those actions, and actions like these, they undermine peace and stability across the Taiwan Strait, which we continue to believe, and it is a viewpoint that we know our French allies share. There's no reason for the PRC to turn a transit which held precedent which is consistent with U.S. long-standing policy into something that it's not.
The spokesperson of the Eastern Theater Command of the PLA said that on April the 8th to the 10th, the PLA launched a combat readiness security patrol encircling the Taiwan island and carried out joint assault exercise. This is a stern warning to the provocative activities of Taiwan independent secessionist forces and their collusion with external forces, and a necessary move to safeguard national sovereignty and territorial integrity. I would also like to add that the One China principle is a well-established international consensus and a norm in international relations.
In keeping with our belief that we won't be deterred from operating safely and responsibly in the seas and the skies of the Western Pacific, consistent with international law. In keeping with that, the Nimitz Carrier Strike Group and Marine Amphibious Readiness Group are conducting routine operations in the Philippine Sea and will remain in that region. And I will say again that there's no reason to turn this transit into something that it was not.
The Foreign Ministry spokesperson already issued a statement on Tsai Ing-wen's transit through the U.S. and the collusion between the U.S. and Taiwan. China will take strong measures in response to safeguard our sovereignty and territorial integrity. As I said, the Eastern Theater Command of the PLA spokesperson also said that the security patrol and the exercise is a strong warning to the provocative activities of Taiwan independent secessionist forces and their collusion with external forces, and a necessary move to safeguard national sovereignty and territorial integrity.
Meanwhile, a provincial maritime authority said China will ban ships from entering an area north of Taiwan on Sunday due to possible falling rocket wreckage. This is just days after Beijing conducted large-scale military drills around the self-ruled island. The announcement came after Taiwan's Transport Ministry said Wednesday that Beijing planned to impose a no-fly zone north of the island due to space activities. The air restrictions would be enforced from 9:30 a.m. to 9:57 a.m. on Sunday, the ministry said, adding that the zone lies on the convergence areas of many international routes. Vessels would be forbidden to enter for the duration of the shutdown. China had initially planned a 3-day shutdown, but had relented following objections from Taiwanese authorities. It is unclear what link, if any, exists between the restricted zone and Beijing's recent war games. Another story making headlines this week in the ASEAN region is the thick smog blanketing a Thai city. Hazardous pollution levels in northern Thailand have left the historic city of Chiang Mai choking under thick smog, and this had locals worried about the impact on tourism and their health. Let's watch this.
ภาพที่เคยเจอก่อนหน้านี้ที่ผมเคยมานะครับมันยังสวยกว่านี้มันยังสดใสกว่านี้แต่พอมาเจอในรอบนี้นะครับที่ผมมารอบนี้รู้สึกว่ามุมมองที่เคยเห็นหลายๆอย่างเนี่ยพอมีหมอกเข้ามาพอมีฝุ่นเข้ามาตรงนี้นะครับมันรู้สึกว่าความสวยงามมันลดลงมันทำให้ผมรู้สึกว่ามันเป็นตัวเลือกหนึ่งว่าจะมาอีกครั้งหนึ่งไหมถ้าว่ายังมีฝุ่นละอองอยู่แบบนี้ครับ
A Taiwanese court Thursday sentenced 9 people to prison terms ranging from 11 to 18 years on human trafficking charges, luring dozens of people to Cambodia to toil in online scam syndicates. Online boiler room rackets have long had a presence across Southeast Asia, where victims have reported traveling to Myanmar, Cambodia, Thailand, and Laos on false promises of romance or high-paying jobs. Those sentenced on Thursday included the head of a human smuggling ring that Taiwanese authorities last year said had advertised promises of high salaries and easy loans on social media. Taipei's district court sentenced ringleader Li Chenghao to 18 years in prison. The 9 defendants formed a criminal organization of human trafficking and lured people into agreeing to work in Cambodia by offering high salaries or helping to pay off debts, the court said in a statement Thursday. But in reality, the deceived were sold to Cambodia at a cost of hundreds of thousands of Taiwan dollars. The other defendants were sentenced to between 11 and 16.5 years in prison. Vietnam will probe TikTok over toxic content hosted by the hugely popular Chinese-owned video sharing app, officials said Thursday. TikTok has an estimated 50 million users in Vietnam, according to data from research firm Data Reporter cited by the government. Head of Vietnam's Radio, TV, and Electronic Information Lee Quang Thu Do said the Information Department will organize an interministerial inspection of the company in May. He said TikTok has no effective control measures over content which violates politics, against party and state, fake news, toxic content. The lack of control was facilitating this dissemination of fake news, causing losses in economics and social instability. The app already faces growing pressure from Western governments over fears that user data could be used or abused by Chinese officials. It was fined in Britain this week and banned from official devices in Australia. Beyond the region, a severe tropical cyclone hit Western Australia with record-breaking wind speeds Friday, but officials said that population centers appeared to have avoided the brunt of the storm.
The tropical cyclone's been downgraded to a Category system and will continue a Category 2 system and will continue to move inland to the southeast over the course of today and then off into the Northern Territory later today and into tomorrow. Port Hedland is no longer on a red alert. We had crews out at 4 a.m. this morning. Once the danger had passed there, we were able to lift that red alert not long after that. We're currently conducting assessments from the air and by land, and we've got a helicopter working its way up from Port Hedland up through the Great Northern Highway to Pardue Roadhouse and further north. We're also having crews coming down from the north from Broome, and they've been to Bidjadanga this morning, and we're happy to report there has been no structural damage of significance at Bidjadanga.
Tropical cyclone Ilsa was upgraded to a Category 5 storm, the strongest on the scale, shortly before crossing the coastline near the sparsely populated town of Pardue, about 19 hours drive northeast of Perth. The owners of the Pardue Roadhouse, a small petrol station and caravan park, said on social media that early signs indicated their business had suffered great damage. But authorities said major population centers appeared to have escaped the brunt of the cyclone, which has now weakened to a Category 3. The Bureau of Meteorology said the cyclone had set a preliminary Australian record for the strongest sustained wind speeds over a 10-minute period, averaging 218 kilometers per hour with gusts of 288 kilometers per hour. The Department of Fire and Emergency Services issued a new series of red alerts as it tracked inland Friday, ordering people to stay indoors until given the all clear. Tropical cyclone Ilsa gathered strength over the Indian Ocean, forcing Port Hedland, one of the world's major iron ore shipping hubs, to clear all vessels in preparation. Rice, Asia's most important staple, is to blame for around 10% of global emissions of methane, a gas that over 2 decades traps about 80 times as much that heat as carbon dioxide. Scientists say that if the world wants to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, rice cannot be ignored. Vietnam has been showing efforts to reduce methane from rice cultivation by removing straw from the fields and turning it into mushrooms and organic fertilizer. Let's watch this.
What accounts for 10% of global emissions of methane? It's not belching cows or landfills, but rice. Scientists say if the world wants to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, the staple crop cannot be ignored. Farmer Dongvan Khan has joined a scheme to recycle straw from his fields instead of burning it.
Nhưng mà tôi theo như tôi thấy tốt hết á, là như mình phát triển bên cái hữu cơ này nhiều, thì cái vụ mà ô nhiễm môi trường nó sẽ giảm, mà mình được có cái lợi luôn. Thay vì hồi ngày xưa.
Methane is generated by bacteria that grow in flooded rice paddies and thrive if the leftover straw rots. Over time, methane traps about 80 times as much heat as carbon dioxide.
So rice, which sets them apart from other crops, has a standing water layer in the field, which means there's no exchange of air between the soil and the atmosphere. So that means you have in the soil anaerobic conditions, and that means there are different bacteria active in the soil than you would find in wheat or maize.
As part of an initiative by the International Rice Research Institute, Khan now removes the straw from his fields and turns it into other products, earning a small income on the side.
Tại vì cái thứ nhất là bán gom được, có thu nhập, có tiền. Thứ hai là trồng nấm, nấm được thu hoạch cũng có tiền. Và thứ ba, bán cái phụ phẩm của nấm đó, là cái bã rơm đó, về đây tới bên đây mua để làm phân hữu cơ lại đó.
Under the Global Methane Pledge, Vietnam and several other major rice producers in Asia have vowed to cut emissions by 30% between 2020 and 2030. But the two largest producers, China and India, failed to sign. And while Mekong farmers like Khan have taken a step towards more sustainable farming, for now he is part of a small minority.
And as the usual habit in this program, we would like to end the day on a positive note. Let's encourage and build each other up so that no one is left behind. From EBC Thailand Bureau, I am Crystal Mapa. We live in extraordinary times.